Hey, welcome to another episode of the Overcome University podcast. Today we have a powerhouse guest, Heather O'Connor, a successful divorce attorney and founder of O'Connor Family Law Firm. Heather has transformed her own personal struggles with divorce into a thriving career, helping countless others turn their divorces into major life resets. She's here to share her journey of overcoming adversity, building a successful firm, and empowering her clients to navigate emotional and legal challenges of divorce. I can't wait to talk to Heather about this conversation as it's an important one for myself. So, Heather, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. And I'm really excited to be here. I think what you bring to everyone is awesome. So let's get on to inspiring.
Let's hop into it. So, I'm one that's been divorced twice and just recently got remarried for a year now. So, I know this topic is near and dear to me, and quite a few of our audience have, as they've been through some challenges. So, I want to hop into it. Can you tell us a little bit about like your personal story of going through your difficult divorce and how that inspired you to even starting your profession and starting your career to become an attorney too as well?
Sure. So we have to go back many, many years because I got married very, very young. So I was 20, not even 21 yet when I got married, but I was pregnant. And so I had my first child at the age of 21.
Mm-hmm.
We had two more kids after that. So we had a total of three children. And about 6 years into our marriage, it was not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of issues. I won't get into all of them, but some of them involved physical abuse. And so when not to get into the nitty gritty of that, because that could take us, down a whole
Right,
nother
right,
rabbit
right,
hole.
right.
But we ended up going through a divorce. It was a very high conflict divorce. Our file was about this big by the time we ended. You could always tell when it was going to be our case because you'd see it come up and go in front of the judge. We're like, here we go. you know, but that experience was my first involvement with the law.
Wow.
And with the emotional side of divorce, because I knew getting out of an unhealthy relationship was really important, but there were so many things, including my upbringing of being religious and not believing in divorce and believing, you get married and you're married for life. All these things, created so many ups and downs of this roller coaster of emotions where one minute I would be like ecstatic and I'm like, we're going to create a new life. And the next minute I'd be like hiding in the closet crying so my kids couldn't see me
Wow.
because I was losing a lot of life that for me was very important.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found in the legal sphere is that the attorneys didn't understand that. They spoke the legal words, the mumbo jumbo, the legal custody and jurisdiction, and all these things that sounded really impressive because all I had was a high school diploma at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at the entirety of the situation and I thought, this needs to be done better.
Mm-hmm.
This needs something that it's missing. And it's that empathy, it's that understanding. It's understanding that a divorce is not just the result with a legal document that has words on it. It's a life change.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's not started at the very beginning, you're doing an injustice to your client
Mm-hmm.
because then they have to start it once it's over. And that's an even more uphill battle. And so, with my divorce, my kids were all under the age of 6 when we went through it. I decided it was a complete like Reese Witherspoon, Legally Blonde moment where I said, I'm going to be a divorce attorney and I'm going to start my own firm. But that's what I decided to do. And so I went to community college, undergrad, then law school, and built a career basically while my kids were growing up. And that presented a lot of challenges in and of itself. But it was that experience and feeling as though it needed to be better that
Mm-hmm.
really drove me to create what we have created now.
Wow, 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 wow. Thank you for sharing that story. So inspirational. I want to follow up with how did you dive deeper into becoming the person that you are now today to even go through that? Because I know that that could be mentally grueling, physically grueling. You just mentioned like hiding in the closet because you didn't even want like your kids to actually see that. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then for our listeners that's listening, what advice would you give someone who's trying to get out of something similar in the same situation?
Um, Two very different aspects. I think for me, it's a complete mindset change. You know,
Mhm.
you have to be willing to really look at yourself and take responsibility. You know, with the issues that we had in our marriage, I contributed to them in ways. You know, I put up with certain behaviors. I turned a blind eye to certain behaviors, certain patterns. And what I decided was I wanted to create something where my kids could see good patterns and not
Mhm.
patterns, as well as making sure that I didn't end up in that same situation all over again. So it's not necessarily saying like it ended because of me, but what did I do, or what could I have done to prevent this from happening in the first place? And that took I went to a lot of therapy. Therapy. I watched a lot of YouTube videos. Watched a lot of TED Talks. And it was a matter of, how do I change my perception on life so that I can move forward and utilize what I've been through to drive me in the direction I want to go?
Mhm.
And you know, on top of that, I was very poor. You know, I remember a time where I walked into the grocery store and looked at the meat section, and I was like, maybe I should steal a steak. Like, that would be nice. And I didn't steal the steak, just to let you know. But there were points where I was on food stamps. I didn't have food. And that drive to want to provide for my children definitely also pushed. So it was definitely two parallels. It was, I want to be in a good mindset, as well as I want to set up a new life for my family. And
Mhm.
those were the two things that really drove me. And I think for somebody that's coming out of a situation, it's really important to start really focusing on you. It's very easy as a mom, as a parent, as a wife, and I'm saying that just because I'm female. The other side, you know, men can go through the same thing within their roles. But a lot of times you get so hyper focused on all the responsibilities that come with all those roles. It's very easy to let yourself and your own, you know, desires and needs fall to the wayside.
All
And
right.
I remember sitting with my therapist, and she asked me a very simple question. And it was, what's your favorite pizza? And I was like, well, you know, Jenna likes cheese and TJ likes pepperoni. And she stopped me. She goes, no, 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 not your kids' favorite pizza. What's your favorite pizza? And I sat there completely dumbfounded because this was such an easy question and I didn't know the answer. And I
Exactly.
think it's losing sight of that you have to be able to find first, to be able to find a strength in yourself to get through the hard times.
Wow. I love that because it sounds like they're asking to tap into like a mindset shift in regards to like how you were looking at things and how you were facing things. I want to ask you this. You mentioned that co-parenting was a little bit of a challenge and a little bit of a struggle once you guys transitioned out of that divorce, right? Can you talk about maybe a little bit, if you want to go into that, like what was that like for you in regards to like co-parenting? Because I know that could be a challenge for people that either just got divorced. Sometimes it's nasty. It could be a challenge if they're in different states, different cities, you name it, and so on and so forth. And then how do you help with navigating clients going through similar types of situations with co-parenting?
Yeah, challenging is an understatement. You know, we we went at the very beginning. My ex was very not consistent. You know, there were times that the kids would be sitting there in their Halloween costumes waiting for him on Halloween because it was his year to take them. And then he'd call like 45 minutes later and be like, oh, I had to go into Boston. And then the kids were upset. So communication was definitely a challenge.
Hmm.
When he got a new girlfriend, things actually changed. She kind of like whipped him into shape and he became a more consistent father. But
Hmm.
one of the things he had promised me while we were still married was that, quoting, if you ever leave me, I will make sure you have nothing. I will make sure your kids hate you. I will make sure you have no money. You will have no housing. And you will be lucky if you could sleep on a park bench. And I feared that when he first said it because I did believe he had the power to do that.
Hmm.
But through our divorce, there was a constant struggle where he was constantly trying to take the kids from me. And it did get to the point where both my son and my two oldest children at one point didn't talk to me for years.
Hmm.
And it was excruciating. It
Hmm.
was so hard, and I think it's one of the reasons we deal with a lot of parental alienation at this
Hmm.
point. Luckily, my kids all have a really good relationship with me at this point. They're all adults now. My daughter has children of her own, and it took them a while to see the reality of the situation, because I tried really, really hard. Despite what I knew about their dad, I tried really, really hard not to bring them into that,
Hmm.
but he did. And that was incredibly difficult. And there's no good words of how to get through that. It sucks. Like, it's
Hmm.
not fun. Like I said, excruciating. But the only thing is, you can only do what you know is right and never give up. And eventually, hopefully, everybody kind of sees what the truth in the story is.
Absolutely. As you're telling me that, it just started resonating with me when I was going through my first divorce. I was told I'm going to take every single thing from you because I was the only one that was working at the time. And then in addition to that, our son was 2 years old, and we went through a custody battle for close to 3.5 years. And I was living in Washington D.C. She was living in South Florida. So the back and forth, and my son is crying, and all of these different things whenever you're saying all of the goodbyes, and the phone calls are very hard to deal with and things like that. So it was very hard. As you're saying that, it just started like just reminiscing about it and things like that. I want to ask you this, when parents are going through divorces, you just spoke about the alienation aspects of things. What are some things that clients of yours may be facing some of those same things that you share with them in regards to like going through that and bearing that in regards to until ultimately getting to a resolution?
I think one of what has really become one of my life mottos, and I think my team hears it from me all the time, clients hear from me from all the time, is that you can't control anyone else.
Hmm.
You can want things, you can hope for things, but you have no control. You have no control over your ex. You don't even really always have control over your children. You
Hmm.
don't have control over the attorneys. You don't have control over the judges. The only person you can control is you. So that's where completely your efforts have to be on, what can I do to make this situation better, instead of looking at what do I need to make this situation better? What can I do? Because then you're taking control, which gives you a sense of power instead of a sense of loss and security, and allows you to move forward, even if it's not the most ideal situation.
Hmm.
It's I have another saying of always make today better than yesterday. And it's a matter of, it doesn't have to be anything huge, but one little step forward in the right direction. And you just take that step, take that step, take that step. Eventually you find life happens as it should.
Yes.
As long as you're not giving up and you're always holding yourself accountable for moving forward.
You mentioned something earlier about empathy, and I think sometimes that's a part that's missing throughout the whole transaction or transition of everything, whether it comes to with the lawyer or whether it's just business, 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 and some of the other things in between that is not taken into consideration. For yourself, how do you implement that within your practice to create that relationship with you and your clients, and also extend it, if that doesn't even extend to the other parties too as well?
Yeah, it can be very difficult, and it's been one of these things, because obviously empathy, there's different levels of it,
Okay.
because empathy and understanding doesn't take any effort, any extra effort. It's a matter of being civil, it's a matter of being human. But it also, I think, a lot of times when people are going through divorce or custody issues, there's a lot of emotions that go through that.
Right.
And so part of that empathy is being willing to listen and not just look at this as a transaction. The downside of that for the client is you're paying for the attorney's time. And
Hmm.
it can get very, very expensive if you're
Right.
basically utilizing your attorney as a therapist.
Mm.
So, what we have essentially done within our firm to kind of balance these two things is we have, what we call a coach, basically. We use different terms for her in relation to what she's doing, but
Okay.
client support. And what she does is she works with the clients on that emotional level to start changing mindsets that as a client, they're not paying that additional. We eat that cost as part of legal fees.
Mhm.
But then, they have that additional support where then they can use their attorney more so just for those legal transactions to try to keep costs down. But I don't think a lot of firms have that. Make sure you're in, coaching or therapy or some sort of support group. I remember I had a client, one of my top 5 clients, I think. And and he was this amazing guy. Not really amazing when I first started working with him. He was very, very angry when I first started working with him. But he committed to changing his mindset. And
Mhm.
I remember he would call me and just talk about how he was reacting. Like, this is what happened. This is how I reacted. How could I react differently? What should I start doing? And I ended up being like, dude, like, you're paying me a lot of money. Like, you have a therapist. Why don't you work with your therapist? And he was like, no, I know I'm paying for this, but I'm getting more out of you than I am my therapist. As long as we're clear that you're paying. But that's the relationship that's missing, I think, a lot of times, where attorneys, it's very easy to know this is what we need to prove. There's a lot of gray area in law, but a lot of it is black and white. There's so much gray area in the emotional side of it and getting through that. And that's where we have tried to balance, that with trying to keep costs down.
I absolutely love that. I've actually never even heard of that. And I think that's a key element that you have in your practice that I think is very important, that probably should be, I don't know, copied or whatever from other lawyers out there too as well. Because I think as people are going through that in between those times, even when you're not seeing your lawyer, talking to your lawyer, there's so many other things that's taking place that's going to be so much more tolling on you. I want to talk about something that's very important when it comes to the separation of a family, and oftentimes it actually goes down the line of like domestic violence. So I wanted to talk about, when you're working with clients, especially around this particular topic, what, and restraining orders and things around that, what are some approaches and things like that, where if you know those things are in place, that you're sharing with clients, talking to clients about, when it comes to these types of situations, to either get them out of it and navigate through some of those things, because it's a very touchy topic.
Yeah. And it's funny because when I first decided to become an attorney, I had a very different viewpoint. I was going to be a champion for people who had gone through domestic violence. And unfortunately, in practice, what I've found is that the legal system is so easily abused by
Mhm.
people who falsely make allegations. And it's become almost as much of a passion of mine of fighting people who are making false allegations as to protecting people who are truly being abused.
Right.
And it can be very, very difficult to know, because nobody's behind closed doors except for the two people.
Right.
And but there's definitely certain things, throughout my experience, that sends up little red flags of this might not be the right case. And
Mhm.
so I think there's two very different paths to go down there, because we do screen, and this is the same thing if somebody calls in saying they're being alienated from their children. Sometimes they really are, and I think parental alienation is a form of abuse.
Mhm.
But a lot of times there's some wrongfulness going on, and
Mhm.
or a redirected blame because they don't want to take responsibility for their own actions of what has destroyed the relationship with their children. So for both those areas, we've kind of built this intake system that digs a little deep.
I
And
see.
I'll be the first to say I've been fooled before,
Mhm.
on both sides, where I've had people say that they were abused, and then we get to court and I find out they've just made up evidence. And I'm like, oh no, it was one of those. But I think for people who are coming out of truly abusive situations, and I think the the definition, the legal definition of physical abuse is much more narrow than the general scope of abuse, because
Right.
you can have emotional abuse, you can have manipulation, you can have control, which might not necessarily be considered physical abuse. But a lot of that, again, comes down to you have to be willing to change yourself.
Hmm.
You had some sort of um, you looked past things, you ignored behavior, you ignored patterns and allowed it to continue. And that's not redirecting blame from the person who is the abuser, but it's you have to be able to take that power back. And being able to work on that, I think, is one of the most important things, because the ability to not allow somebody's words or actions to negatively affect you takes a lot of strength. And
Definitely.
it's just like anything else, like going to the gym. You have to work out your muscles to build the muscles. You have to work up your confidence and your courage to be able to get to that point. And it takes time. And so I think for people who are coming out of it, one, obviously physical safety, most important. You
Yeah.
need to be physically safe. If you're not physical safe, having a strong character is going to do nothing for you if your spouse is coming at you, or
Hmm.
strangling you. But assuming that you're in a safe environment, really working on yourself, because the legal system does not always protect victims. So,
Well, I'm glad you shared that. I recall that I had a guest on the podcast come on, and she was sharing a story, and she grew up in a household where the mindset that you never divorce your spouse, you stick in there because of whatever beliefs and reasons and things like that. And and she was always getting beat up and beat on by her husband. And it was not until that she sent her kids to a birthday party one day, and the kids, for some reason, came back from the birthday party and they saw their dad like with a pillow over the mom's head choking, and they started beating up on the dad. And that's when she decided to file for divorce. So I just think that it's always important to like share some of these things, because obviously we want people that's going to go through domestic violence be raising their hand for the right reasons, not making it up. But definitely whenever someone is in that situation, actually do raise their hand and get the help that they actually do need. I want
100%. And sorry,
to go
because
ahead.
I do want to just add this, because I think a lot of times, based on what I experienced, based on, me speaking with other people who have gone through similar situations, it's very easy, again, to say, we're just going to keep this going. I'm going to try to keep the situation so the physical abuse doesn't happen. And I was there. I remember feeling as though I had to be very careful of what was said and when it was said and how it was said, so that the situation didn't explode. And
Mhm.
it wasn't until, my ex-husband had gotten arrested for attempting to strangle me. My kids were there, they saw
Wow.
everything. The police had come, and my 4-year-old at the time was skipping around the yard going, "My daddy got arrested. My daddy got arrested." And the police said, "Ma'am, this isn't really a normal reaction. Like, do you mind if we speak with your son?" And I said, "No, go ahead." So they took him aside. And when they came back to me, they said, "We spoke with your son, and we're going to have to make a report with what we call DCF, social services."
Mhm.
Because when we asked him if he understood what was going on, he said, "Yes, my daddy got arrested because he hurt my mama like he hurts us." And
Wow.
that was the moment for me where I said, "No more."
Mm.
And I think some people, and even in the court, I've seen the question of, "Why didn't you come forward sooner? Why didn't you report this?" And it is such, I don't know if I can swear on your podcast, but it is such a BS question,
Mhm.
because because you are protecting your
Mhm.
family, you are protecting your children.
Mhm.
And I think, I don't want to call it honorable, because you're doing yourself and your family a disservice by not stepping forward, but you're doing what you believe is right. And
Right.
that doesn't make it wrong.
Right.
And I just wanted to add that, because I know it's a question that comes up very often in the legal world of, "Well, if this is true, why didn't you report it sooner?" Well, screw off. Like, everybody has their own time. And for a lot of people, it's when you find out that it's affecting your children that that's the line in the sand.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about this because speaking of something like that, as serious as that is, and you take a client through the entire process. So post divorce, now your client is finally divorced. Now they have to deal with another new life, a reset, and all of those things. I know sometimes people will have like divorce parties and things around that just to get over this, right? What 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 are some things that you help your clients when they're going through this transition when it comes to like self-care, surviving a divorce, and moving forward with their lives? What are some things that you and your clients or you and your team are putting in place to help people go through this transition?
I think this is one area where we can definitely get better because as of right now, it's almost like your case is over. We've given you the foundation you need to create that life.
Hmm.
I'd love to be able to create it. I know we have recently started, if somebody wants to continue using our coach post, we have a way to potentially make that happen, even though they're no longer necessarily a client of the firm. But I mean, if my newsletters, if people are still signing them up, are constantly, how do you change your life? How do you go after goals? My team calls it Heather's rah rah. Like it's very, it's very, built on always looking to do better, because I think in life, the second you stop growing,
Hmm.
that's where you start dying. So
Yep.
it doesn't mean that you're out there making life changes every single day. Again, it's just those little things that you can do, a mindset, a smile, a nice gesture to somebody else, those little things in life that really mean a lot. But I think that is one area we could do better, and I plan on doing better, is that
Absolutely.
post divorce aspect.
For people that just Google or people that just look at YouTube and things like that in regard when it comes to divorce, I know I was one that had no clue. My family has never been through a divorce, anything like that. So, what are some like mis misconcepts and things around there where people actually do read or try to follow, but they're actually mistakes in regards to like the entire divorce process that they should be avoiding?
Oh, there's so many. I think one of the hardest things that we deal with, and I think it's fairly common, because within a marriage, one person usually is more in charge of the finances than the other. And what that comes down to is a situation almost of an imbalance. And one person has control of the finances, they know what's going on, the other person doesn't. And the person who doesn't needs to. And I think if within marriages, if you can be on the same page with that, I think there might be less divorce to begin with.
Hmm.
But moving into a divorce, if you don't know what your financial situation is,
Hmm.
that can make our job very difficult, because sometimes you might think it's a completely different situation than it actually is. And then we're working through the shock of finding out. We've had cases where people didn't realize their spouse was 200, $300,000 in debt,
Hmm.
not including a mortgage or anything like that, just talking credit cards, things along those lines. We've had people that believe there's a lot more money than there are. So then we're hunting things down, and that can be, very, very costly, because we're looking for things that might not be there. So having an understanding of what your actual financial status is very important, I think, both to making a marriage work as well as to moving forward with the divorce. The other thing is, we get all the time, the house is just in my spouse's name. Do I have any rights to the house? They tell me I need to leave. They tell me that it's mine. Now, I can only speak to Massachusetts because this is where I'm licensed. I don't know the laws of any jurisdiction. I need that little disclaimer here. But here, it doesn't matter whose name the house is in. If you've been living there, it's a marital home.
Hmm.
And there's different factors that go into what your interest is in that home. But for the most part, that's getting split. And somebody can't say, it's in my name, you need to get out.
Hmm.
But we've seen it happen so often, where somebody leaves because the other person has convinced them, well, to get
Hmm.
divorced, you need to be out. That's just not true here. And I think that's a huge thing.
I love that. What it also sounds like to me, in addition, I think, is you had mentioned when you were going through your divorce, you came in with like a big stack of paper. So you have to be an active participant in regards to like, I guess, like keeping an accumulation of every single thing, because am I right where it may have to be used as evidence down the road when you go into the courtroom, as in like maybe it's your text messages, your bills, your receipts, those types of things. Am I right about that?
Yeah, there's so much that goes into it, but it's also it's a cost benefit analysis.
Okay.
It's what's really important here. Where do we start with to try to
Mhm.
keep costs down? And this gets very important when you get into actual discovery. So the
Mhm.
exchange of documents and evidence that might be necessary if your case is headed towards
Mhm.
trial.
Mhm.
And I remember one time, in Massachusetts, there's a certain amount of documents that are mandatory to exchange. So they have to in every single divorce. And our client showed up literally with 4 bags of unopened mail. And she's like, here's all of my documents from the last 4 years. And we were like, I was, I was like, you really want to pay us to go through all this? And she was like, yeah, I don't want to do it. Don't do that. That is not the right way to go about it. The more organized you can be,
Mhm.
usually the easier it is for your attorney, because you have to remember you're going to know your life better than your attorney. So
Mhm.
it's a matter of getting them things in an organized manner that they can then utilize efficiently to help keep that bill down. So we also get things from people who, because the emotional side of it, and I think this also goes to kind of a misconception.
Mhm.
And again, this is Massachusetts only. Here, cheating doesn't matter. There's no repercussions if your spouse is cheated or if you have cheated. And that's often a misconception, because people will come in and be like, they cheated, I want to take everything. Or I cheated, I'm afraid they're going to get everything. Or the divorce gets hung up on the emotional aspect of proving that maybe your spouse is telling you you didn't cheat, but you're pretty
Mhm.
sure they did. And you want to prove it just to hammer a point. It doesn't matter. And getting people to understand that they're not going to get more money in relation to cheating. They're not going to have to pay more or pay less because they were cheated on. That can be a very difficult emotional battle to kind of overcome. There's some states that I know, like alimony definitely comes into play if there was a cheating situation. Massachusetts isn't one of those. So
Mhm.
that can be really, really difficult.
Wow. That's good to know and actually understand that, because I'm thinking about it for myself. When I got divorced, it was in Washington, D.C., and their law is you have to be separated for 1 year before the divorce is actually final. So it's good to actually hear that. When you think about how far you've come now and working with so many different clients, what do you think is the most rewarding aspect of being a divorce attorney?
Again, I think this is like multi-level, because a divorce attorney, where I've built my firm to,
Hmm.
we're now, I think we have 23 people on our team. We have a number of attorneys. I have really stepped out of litigation myself,
Hmm.
even though I love litigating, and it's a hard thing. But the way that I want to run the firm and ensure that every single client who's coming in is getting the same level of service that I know I would be giving them personally, has
Hmm.
created a situation where I've really become more of a CEO of the firm than an
Hmm.
active practicing attorney.
Hmm.
Um, so my favorite things are when I get messages from clients, speaking about our staff and our team, and the different interactions they've had and how they felt so supported and heard and ready to move forward. And for me, I think on a litigation side, I love making people cry if I go to trial. Like, I love proving that somebody's a liar. I love proving that there's control and manipulation, and that it's their fault. But ideally you don't get to that point. So ideally the situation is you come to an amicable agreement that everybody can walk away with, knowing that they can live with. So
Hmm.
there's different aspects to what I love the most, but on a business side, I love knowing that we're creating something that provides security for our team, that has this emphasis on the values and the missions that I've instilled.
Hmm.
So many different levels, but I like being that our team is pretty kick ass. So
So as we get ready to wrap up here, I want you to think about your career and the service that you guys provide, what are some advice? What are some key takeaways from what you've been through and clients that you've worked with that you want to leave our audience with?
I think sometimes if somebody didn't know me back when I first started or when I was going through school and they just met me now, they would look and they would say, "Wow, she's really successful. You know, she has everything."
Mhm.
Um, I think it's very easy sometimes to look, and by no means am I at an end result here. I still have a lot of things I'm trying to accomplish, but it's very easy to look at that end result and say, "Ugh, if only." Look at people's success as a way to propel you. Dig into their past and see what they've been able to overcome to inspire you. You know,
Mhm.
I remember my daughter, we lived in a very poor community and she was in public school. And the teacher had told her, you have to teach Portuguese, you know, because you're never going to be able to leave this community. So you need to be able to speak the language.
Mhm.
And she stood up. She was in 5th grade and she stood up and she might have been in 6th grade. And she said, "Don't you tell me or anyone else in this class that they're stuck because of where they are right now. I
Mhm.
watch my mom and she's in school and she's going to be a lawyer and she had nothing, but she's not going to have nothing. So
Mhm.
don't you tell us we're stuck." And that was something that through every challenge pushed me to do
Mhm.
better, to be better, to because I wasn't just doing it for me anymore. I was doing it for her. I was doing it to prove to other people that you are not stuck. And I think sometimes it's very easy when you're down to feel stuck and
Mhm.
to get in your head and to feel as though there's not that light at the end of the tunnel. But look at people who have been able to come out of that, and this is one of the reasons I think your podcast is so great. You know, look at people who have been able to do it to show you that it can happen. You know, you just need to get your mind in a place where you can make it happen.
Absolutely. Well, Heather, it's been a pleasure to have you here on the podcast. How can people find you, book you, work with you, get you to come on stage to speak about this topic? Tell us all.
Yeah, so our website is familylawma.com. We're O'Connor Family Law. We're on all your social media avenues for O'Connor Family Law. Um, TikTok, our TikTok blew up last year or so. So, you know, around here, I walk in and they're like, "Oh, you're that TikTok lawyer." But yeah, I've started doing presentations and panels and speeches, which I absolutely want to get into because I think inspiring is a way to be able to give back. It makes all the hard times that I've gone through worth it, knowing that it can help somebody else come out. So, familylawma.com, O'Connor Family Law. That's how they can find us.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing so much about your profession, your background. I think it's truly inspiring to our audience. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Until next time, guys, God bless.
Ain't it all? Couple dollars in my pocket, no income and go. Been working on my body, getting healthier. Thank God for clarity.